Hi and welcome to this video in which we look at handling weighting within the QPSMR Companion. Now the first thing to say is there's two types of weighting that you can have. There's target weighting and rim weighting. So target weighting is where you have a variable or a question that you want to rebalance the sample so that the respondents are weighted to some targets, and those targets might be actual numbers or percentages. So let's take a very simple example. Let's say you do a survey of 100 people and 50 of them are male and 50 of them are female, but you want your targets to be 60 male, 40 female. You would weight the males by 60 divided by 50, which is 1.2, and you would weight your females by 40 divided by 50, which would be 0.8, and apply those weights to the males and females so that your sample was rebalanced to give you the 60-40 split that you wanted to achieve the targets you wanted. Now, target weighting can be within two or more questions. So we could, for example, looking at this very simple questionnaire here, weight to gender within region. And if we did gender within region, we would need to have targets for the males in the first region, the males in the second region, the males in the third region, the females in the first region, second and third region. So we'd have 6 targets in total. So there we would have 6 figures that we're weighting to. Again, they could be whole numbers or percentages that we're weighting to, but we'd have in essence 6 targets for those from those 2 variables, 2 genders and 3 regions. Now, rim weighting is slightly different. Rim weighting is where you have the targets for each of the questions or variables you want to weight to, but you don't have the interlocking cells. So by that, to use the gender and region example again, I might have targets for gender, so I might have targets 50 male, 50% females, and for region I might have targets of 40% for region 1, 40% for region 2, and 20% for region 3, but I don't have the interlocking cells for gender within region, and so that would need rim weighting. All right, so we're going to look at both of those types of weighting in this video, and we've got a very short questionnaire. As you can see, we have one question and gender and region, and this survey has 100 respondents in there that we're going to use for weighting our data. So to weight our data, we go to the data menu and we click the weight data file. And the first thing we'll do is to browse and pick our data file, and it will tell me that I haven't got any data to weight to yet. So I would select my targets and I would select an entry, and let's first of all just weight to gender here. So let's weight to gender. Okay, and now I could set targets for my genders, and I could set the target here to be a percentage. Let's say I want 50% males and I want a target of 50% females. Now, it's very important when you have your targets, if you use percentages, that they actually add to the right number. So they've got to add to 100% here. They can't add to 99.9. They have to add to exactly 100. All right, so let's OK that. And let's open up my data file. And here's my gender for those respondents. For the 100 respondents, there's the 1 for male, 2 for female. And I'm going to store the weights in a variable called weight. Now, that's the default name that QPSMR Companion uses. I would encourage you to use that in most circumstances, because then when you come to doing tables later on, it will automatically look for that variable weight and apply it. But of course, you could give it a different name if you wanted to. So there we go. There's got no weight in there at the moment. It's just empty at the moment. All right, and I'm going to save this weighting to a file called weighting.xml. So I've gone through the steps here of setting it up, looking at the genders I've got, and then seeing the weights, or waiting for the weights to apply. I'm going to check my data now to make sure it's all fine, and you can see that when it's checked here, everyone gets a weight of 1. But now I want to start calculating my weights. So I'm going to calculate the weights, and you can see now that weights have been calculated, and what it's actually given me is for males, the gender 1, all are getting a weight of 1.16279, and the females with a code 2 are all getting a weight of 0.87719. And you can see I can store that information up to any number of significant digits. I can constrain the weights that are generated. It is a bit dangerous if weights go outside the range of 0 to 0.5 to 2. It's usually quite a dangerous thing to do. It means that your effective sample size will drop. But you get quite a useful little report coming out at the screen here. You can see that actually the weighting isn't have too damaging effect on my sampling here. It's actually producing an effective sample size of 98, which is, I think, reasonably acceptable for this sort of project. If it dropped to something like 80 or 70, you need to possibly worry about that. All right, you've also got the ability here to get reports, so you can get a report of the weights or just a summary. So we could view the summary here, and here's the summary of those weights being applied, and that's been preserved, as you can see here, in a CSV file, so that you can print that off, send it to someone, or manipulate it. All right, so we've now got our weights out from this matrix, which is just males. Of course, a rim weight of 1 dimension or 1 question is exactly the same as a target weight of 1 dimension, so there's no difference there. It's only when you come to do 2 or more there's a difference between target and rim weighting. Let's now save that as, and I'm going to save that as weighted data.csv, and it's written 100 records to weighting data.csv, and now I can save that project, and I can start to work on it if I wish to. And the sort of thing that I might want to do is to merge my data file, having calculated those weights, open the weighted data.csv file and generate and save that to an ASCII file. So I'm just saving that data now. There's my 100 records, which means that now if I go into QPSMR Insight for doing some tables, I could do some tables with these variables here in QPS, and I could analyze gender with region down the side, or I could have done, and I just need to select the data file here. That's data.asc, which is what I just saved it as. OK, and run that, and you can see the target weighting of 50% males and females has worked. My target's now 50-50. That's adjusted possibly my region data, but it looks as though that weighting has worked absolutely fine. All right, so let's quit that now, and I'm going to reopen this project. And I'm now going to do 2-dimensional weighting, both as rims and as target weighting. So let's look at rims first. So let's delete this variable and effectively start again. So let's weight the data again. I didn't save the project, so let's just weight the data again. Get my original data file. Tells me the variable weight is not available yet, and we can select the entries we want to use. This time I'm going to pick gender, and I'm going to also pick region. Now we're going to do rim weighting this time, so I'm going to set the targets for gender, and I'm going to set the target to be 50% again, and the next gender, female, I'm going to set the target to 50 again, and of course again they must set to 100%. Now for the region, I'm going to set the first region to 40%, the second region also to 40%, which means I have to make the third region 20%, and that should mean that it will store that information for me. So let's just open our data again. Okay, it's got our gender and region now, and we can save this again to weighting.xml. I'm going to replace what I had there before because I'm recalculating the weights. Now I'm going to store these weights in the variable weight as recommended. So there's the empty weight. I'm going to prepare the data so it looks fine. All the weights are 1. I'm now going to calculate the weights, and now you can see when I've calculated the weights, I've got different weights depending on whether they are gender 1 and region 1, gender 1 and region 2. So gender 1 and region 1 here, this record, it's got a weight of 1.32 something. Next one 1.38 and so on, and when I get to the next record with gender 1 and region 1, of course that's got the same weight. So it looks as though it's done that perfectly correctly. I can test that again in exactly the same way as before. I can save that data, I can open it back up, merge it and analyze it in QPS. So let's do that just as we did before. Let's data save as. I'm going to overwrite the file I had before, which is fine. I'm going to close it, save those targets to my weighting matrix, save the project, and we're all done. And now I can merge that data back in. I'm going to start with another empty file here. I'm going to open it and merge the data and save to a new raw data file. Let's call this data again and replace what was there before. There's my 100 records, and now I can go off and open up the project here and do a quick table. Just select data file yet again because it's a new one now. Okay, and we can do a quick table of gender by region or region by gender, and I'm going to pick the format option RTH so that we get that table percentaging in both directions, because that will help us check it. And we can see here that horizontally 50% are male, 50% are females, and when we do the vertical percentages here on the regions, we've got the 40% target north, 40% target central, and 20% target in the south. So that appears to have worked. Again, all the effective sample size data would have been in that report. We could have saved that just as before, but we have successfully managed to carry out rim weighting on 2 rims, and that could be 3 rims, 4 rims, as many as you want there to target your data to, where you don't have interlocking cells. The more rims you add and the more dependent those questions or variables are on each other, the more likely you're going to get volatile weights, and you need to take more care with your weighting to make sure that your expected sample size isn't dropping to an unsuitably low amount. Okay, so finally we're going to look at now target weighting to more than one variable, and I'll just show you how you can start on that procedure and not perhaps carry it through for checking this time, as it's the same as before. So here I'm going to insert first of all a variable that calculates gender and region for me. So all I've got to do here is insert a variable, call it my weighting matrix, or some similar name, capitals here. Okay, I'm going to make it single. Then I'm going to go to the responses tab at the top here, and I'm going to use add response matrix, and the first entry I'm going to select is gender. Okay, the second one I'm going to select is region. Okay, so now I've got 2 genders and 3 regions. I click OK to that, and you can see what it generates for me. It creates a matrix of the 6 regions within the 2 genders. And of course, if I'd picked 3 variables there, it would have multiplied that. Let's say I picked 4 age groups. It would have multiplied this 6 entries here by 4 age groups and given me 24 different items in the variable. So now I've got that variable. And so I need to give it a text here, which I haven't given it yet. So that's got weighting matrix, save it. And now I can go and weight the data, browse my data file, go back to my original data, and go through the same procedure again. So I can set targets, I can choose my entry, I can pick that W matrix, so I can now add a target for each of those, and we could say that the percentage here is 20. Be careful to make sure they add up to the correct amount. 20, that's 40. 20, so that's 60 so far. 15. Now you can paste those weights in. If you've got those figures in a spreadsheet, you can paste them in from an external source, so that's quite easy to do as well. And let's save that information. So we've got that. We can store those weights. Let's put that in a different named variable this time. Okay, so that's our new weighting. We can just check the file, and now we can calculate the weights, and you can see that it's calculated weights for each of the records in here. And we can go through the same process now of saving those weights, building a new data file, and analysing that in QPSMR Insight. So that's how you handle target and rim weighting in QPSMR Companion. You should always take care when you're weighting your data. Look at this figure here. The effective sample size is quite important. You don't want that dropping too low. It's the equivalent, that means, of interviewing 88.3 people if you're sampled correctly rather than adjusting it through weighting. You can set minimum maximum weights here, and you can halt if you go outside those ranges to make sure that you haven't got too heavy a weights. It is a particular problem if you have an insufficient sample size and a lot of rim weighting. It's very prone to having high weights or low weights appearing. So if you only happen to have one person who's male, 16 to 24, who owns a bicycle, who lives in the central region, that might mean that that person needs a very high weight to fulfill all of the targets that you have. Anyhow, that completes this video on weighting. I hope it was useful to you. There's obviously more videos in the series that I'm sure will help you working with QPSMR Companion.